Good evening, good evening, good evening. So we are back for another week. This is HillmanTok University. HillmanTok University, we are having another lecture tonight, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. for the summer semester. Okay. HillmanTok University, welcome. We are talking about the role of the Black professional in today's movement, right? Now, today, one of the things that's in vogue, well, a lot of things are in vogue, but politically, we want to deal with the politics this evening for Black professionals. Right now, everywhere you look, everybody's talking about Gaza, Israel, Gaza. This has escalated now, right? Because now we have Iran involved. So this is going to a whole nother level. And the question always becomes, where do Black people fit into all this? We're talking about Gaza. We're talking about immigration, right? Immigration is hot right now. We're talking about people being deported. And many would have you believe that this is the thing that Black people should be engaged on. And so we want to deal with those questions. For Black professionals, is that the movement for us? Because what you often hear is that our oppression is linked, our struggles are linked, right? You hear that a lot, whether it's LGBTQ movement, whether it's immigration, whatever it is that other groups are facing. We often hear, "Hey, we're all together, we're all linked." And let's just deal with that question, because my idea is, if our oppression is linked, then so should our victories. In other words, what I'm saying is, if our oppression is really linked and this is all the same, when that thing is removed, then we should all get a come up. And historically, I'm challenging that. And so, for example, if Black people come out today and help another group with whatever their problem is going to be taken care of, but will our problem be taken care of? That's the question. If we go out and we really protest hard on Gaza, is the hood going to be any better off? That is a legitimate question to ask politically, right? If we're talking about the role of the Black professional in today's movement and our politics, I mean, it's just a simple question, right? If we really come out hard and protest on immigration, are we going to be better off or not? I mean, it's very straightforward. So to look at that question today, let's go back in time and look historically at another figure who had to wrestle with this. Let's look at Dr. King and the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was perhaps one of the most, maybe the most unpopular war in US history. And it didn't start that way, right? But it became like the most unpopular thing ever. And there's a point where you have a lot of white liberals out protesting the Vietnam War. And the idea is that Black people should be engaged too. And Dr. King gets in the crossfire. Somehow he gets involved. This becomes this huge thing. April 4th, 1967. A lot of people thought Dr. King reached his height as a prophet for social change. Now, remember, Dr. King died April 4th, 1968, but April 4th, 1967 is when he gives a speech at Riverside Church in New York, and he comes out blasting the Vietnam War. Now, when he did that, that was a problem for a lot of people. It was certainly a problem for the president at that time, President Lyndon Johnson. President Johnson, he had helped push the Civil Rights Act. He had pushed the Voting Rights Act. And I don't know if you all remember, like, The Color Purple, the movie back in the day. I think her name was Miss Millie, the white lady, who was like, I've been good to you people, right? Lyndon Johnson has the same idea. Like, I've been good to you people. What's the problem? Like, why are you coming out at me? And there's a quote attributed to President Johnson after Dr. King did this. He says, and again, it's not a direct, but it's attributed to Johnson. What is this GD N-word preacher doing to me? Is what he said to have said at that point. Johnson was very unhappy about this. But Johnson wasn't the only person unhappy. There were some Black people unhappy about this too. There were some Black people who were kind of at odds with Dr. King for coming out against this. And one of those people was Bayard Rustin. Now, Bayard Rustin, if you're not familiar with him, he's one of the greatest organizing minds in the history of the world. Most notably, people know him from the March on Washington in 1963. Dr. King gives his famous I Have a Dream speech. Bayard Rustin's like the main organizer behind that. Rustin had been a mentor to Dr. King, right? So if you go back to the Montgomery bus boycott, when this movement first kicks off, Bayard Rustin goes on to Montgomery to seek out Dr. King. Now, Dr. King's wife, Coretta, knew Rustin. She had heard him speak way back in high school. She thought he was cool. Dr. King did not know him. When Rustin gets there, Dr. King has armed guards outside. He got the guns. Like, nonviolence is not really his thing at this point. Rustin is really schooled in Ghanaian nonviolence. So he tries to school King, help him along. As the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which is King's organization, as that organization develops, Rustin is certainly a mentor to King. He's there, right? They have a pretty great relationship. And this stays true for a long time until there's a very well-known congressman, Adam Clayton Powell, out of Harlem, who could probably best be described as biracial, but certainly a champion for a lot of black causes, and black people really, rock with him. He threatens to out King and Rustin for being in a gay relationship. Now, let's be clear. There's no evidence that that was true. What happened was, leading up to the 1960 Democratic Convention, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, they want to organize this protest. Now, Adam Clayton Powell is a Democrat, so he's not with that. Like, don't come protest in our convention. So what I'll do is I'll tell everyone that you all are gay and in a relationship. Now, Bayard Rustin was certainly gay, right? He made no secret about that. So he and King were cool, but there's just no evidence that they were in some gay relationship. But the strategy works. King has to sort of distance himself from Rustin because he couldn't risk that coming out. He couldn't risk even that rumor. And so he has to kind of distance himself. So fast forward years later, King comes out against Vietnam. Rustin, surprisingly, is like, yeah, King, you shouldn't have done that. And a lot of people were confused because Rustin had always been a pacifist. He didn't support war at all. He didn't even like World War II. He was against all war. So Rustin's like the last person that you would expect to be like, nah, we cool with the war. So a lot of people were surprised about that. But a lot of people also kind of thought Rustin was bogus because the thinking was Rustin is only doing this because he wants clout. Now, remember, he's openly gay. He had been involved in the movement for years, like the 40s and 50s, as a gay man who's not trying to hide the fact that he's gay. So he's not popular at all for this reason alone. He's also been affiliated with the Communist Party back in the day. So again, he's kind of controversial to have around. And of course, the thing with Adam Clayton Powell threatening him and King to say that they're gay. Rustin comes with a lot of baggage. He had always had to be in the background because he's just not somebody you could put out front. Too much baggage. Well, after the March on Washington, Rustin, for the first time in his life, is the it guy. He ends up on the cover, I believe, Time magazine. He's the guy. He's enjoying all this praise and success. The 1964 Democratic Convention, he's riding in a limo with Hubert Humphrey, who ends up being the vice president to Lyndon Johnson. For the first time, Rustin is like in the in circle. And a lot of people thought he's just doing this because he wants to be in. And maybe there's some truth to that, but it doesn't mean that Rustin is wrong, right? The reality of it is Rustin is trying to say to King, black people have all these problems right here, and we should be focused on that. So a lot of people wanted Rustin to come out and blast the war, and he wrote a response to this. He wrote a piece, excuse me. Rustin wrote a response. He writes this piece called Vietnam Where I Stand, I believe is what it's called. Vietnam Where I Stand. And he basically says, look, a lot of people, the movement leaders, they wanted me to come out and give everything to the anti-war effort like they were doing. But he says, and I quote, I don't believe that the civil rights movement is dead, so I am not ready to help bury it. I will not abandon it now when our problems are getting tougher and tougher. Getting decent jobs, housing, and education is harder than integrating lunch counters. We need to redouble our efforts, not dilute and divert them. Now, what Rustin is saying is not very different than a lot of the things that King has said. If you read King's last book, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? He talks about that, like integrating a lunch counter is a lot harder than creating jobs and all these other things. And so Rustin is just saying, look, I hear you about the war stuff, but we got problems right here. Let's focus on that. But to be clear, there were a lot of reasons to not like the Vietnam War, particularly for black people. There's a lot of reasons not to like the Vietnam War. Vietnam was kind of all consuming. And like most things, black people took the brunt of it in a lot of ways. What ends up happening is in 1967, black folks are about 11% of the US population, but we're over 16% of all the draftees to Vietnam. So we're being disproportionately drafted to Vietnam. We're disproportionately dying in Vietnam also. So if you go to 1965, something close to like a quarter, 25% of all the army casualties are black folks. Black men specifically. Black men aren't nearly 25% of the US population, but 25% of people dying in Vietnam are black men. It gets crazier and crazier. There's something called Project 100,000, which dramatically increases the troops in Vietnam. So you have about 23,000 troops in 1965. 2 years later, you have 465,600. So over 465,000 troops. Vietnam keeps escalating and escalating. Project 100,000, interesting tidbit. If you've ever seen the movie Forrest Gump, the character Bubba Bubba's obviously someone, and Forrest Gump for that matter. These are two men who obviously don't have the intellectual capacity that you would normally want as an enlistee. And so Project 100,000 basically says, let's drop all them requirements. Let's just get anybody in here. And a lot of black men are swept into that net. So again, I'm saying if you're a black person, if you're a black family, there are many reasons to not like Vietnam. But the reality is there's a lot of reasons to not like a lot of stuff. So very often when we talk about political issues and political advocacy, people will come with the talking point that, hey, this impacts black people more than anyone. And you can certainly make that argument for Vietnam. The problem with that logic is that applies to everything. Black people are disproportionately impacted by everything. Pick any issue. So people who are pro-life are going to say it's poor black women who are having the abortions. This impacts black people, right? If you're pro-choice, you're going to say, hey, man, the people who really get impacted because they can't access abortions are black women because this impacts their financial, right? Everyone can make the same argument and they're not lying. They're all telling the truth. And so an environmentalist is going to say it's black people who live in the neighborhoods with all the pollution. If you want to talk about unemployment, it's black people. If you want to talk, we're the most impacted by everything, but you can't fight every issue politically. That's not how politics works. You might have to figure out one issue, maybe two, and kind of go with it. And so Rustin is saying, I get that the war is bad. I get that it disproportionately impacts us, but when these black folks come back, they need to have something to come back to. And I'm trying to work on that. And so Rustin is saying, let's make alliances with labor, organized labor, which he does through the A. Philip Randolph Institute. He's saying we have a president who's been rather favorable. He helped with the Civil Rights Act. He helped with the Voting Rights Act. Let's work with this president on the issues that we care about. This isn't the time to alienate allies. This isn't the time to alienate the president and the organized labor. We're going to need those people because this is politics. This is not friendship. It's politics. You have to make alliances. You have to make deals. And if our allies are okay with the war, then maybe we just be quiet on the war right now. Well, King is thinking like a prophet. I want to tell the truth and say what is, which is great if you're a prophet. But the problem is Dr. King also wants to do politics. And so he alienates President Johnson. And later on, when he tries to go with the Poor People's Campaign to address a lot of these issues of poverty and employment that he and Rustin agree on, the president is no longer dealing with him. The president is not taking his calls. The president wanted nothing to do with him. So Dr. King really kind of misplays the politics, right? Playing politics is different from being a prophet. If you're a prophet, you can just say whatever you want because you don't have to meet with that person the next day and try to get a bill passed. Politics are two different sports. So Rustin is saying, listen, let's look at the politics. Yes, Vietnam is bad, but a lot of things are bad. And when it's over, what are we going to come home to? And so it is now. If we go all out on Gaza, right? So remember last year, President Biden goes to Morehouse College and you have these black students protesting primarily over Gaza. And that has to be a strange thing because as black men in America, you mean to tell me the number one issue that you and your family have right now is Gaza? Is Gaza bad? Absolutely. Are there problems? Absolutely. Are there issues with immigrant? Absolutely. But let's say that everything gets fixed tomorrow in Gaza. Is the hood going to be fixed? Is the historic racial wealth gap going to be fixed because you figured out Gaza? And this is what Bayard Rustin wants Dr. King to understand. When Vietnam ends, then what? And so essentially what ends up happening is other groups get what they want because they help. Other groups get what they want in part because black people help them with that. We advocated, we rallied, we protested, we wrote our congressman, all the things. But what did you get out of the deal when it's over? So again, I'm challenging this idea that, our oppression is linked. Is it? Because if it's linked, when the oppressive, whatever it is removed, I should experience a come up like you did, but somehow I'm not experiencing a come up. I'm in the same position. So Dr. King is misplaying the politics here. And I'm wondering if we're not doing the same today. So when we talk about the role of the black professional in today's movement, I think it has to be unapologetically black when it comes to politics. Right. So let's look at AIPAC, this organization that advocates for Israel. APAC doesn't say we are concerned about the quality of life in the Middle East for everyone. No, they're very clear. We are talking about Israel and what's good for Israel. And if you're not with that, we ain't talking. That just actually makes sense. Like, yes, alliances need to be made. And this is what Rustin is saying. Yes, we need to make alliances, even with a lot of white people. Rustin is happy to do that. But these alliances need to go fuel our movement and our progression. It can't be you're getting what you want using my strength, and then when it's over, I'm just sitting in the same place. So again, whether we're talking about immigration, whether we're talking about Gaza or whatever it might be that's in vogue today politically, when that's over, let's say hypothetically it gets solved beautifully, are Black people any better off? And if that answer is not a clear yes, then we kind of need to rethink the politics here. Okay. So again, the study of history is more than just looking at old stories and feeling good about yourself. History should kind of dictate your actions today. And when I look at this story of Dr. King in the Vietnam War with Bayard Rustin, I'm thinking, I think Bayard Rustin had a point. As much as we like Dr. King, he's not inerrant and he's not like divine. He's a person who can be flawed and maybe his strategy wasn't the best. And again, I'm just saying, let's apply that also to today. So again, I'm gonna leave it there. So HillmanTok University, Wednesdays, 7 Eastern. We're going to come back next week. I think you're going to want to join us. I appreciate you rolling with me. As always, you can hit me up, Blackjack Pod on social media, TikTok, Instagram. You can leave a comment, email me. I'm happy to talk to you. So let's do it next week.